Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you tuning in, and we are excited to get started. Before we dive in, I wanted to let you all know that you will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the Questions tab in the control panel, which is on the top right of your screen. You can send in your questions at any time during the webinar, and we will collect these and address as many as we can during the Q&A session, which will be the last 15 minutes of the presentation. Please know that we may not be able to get to all of the questions we receive, but we'll cover as many as we can. So let's go ahead and introduce your speakers today, Sean Dureau and Rick Wells. Sean has over 24 years of experience in the financial field, joining Guidestone in 2002. He holds the Series 7 and 63 securities licenses and has an undergraduate degree in business finance from Dallas Baptist University and his master's degree in strategic leadership from Amberton University. Sean currently serves the retirement needs of our larger West Coast churches and institutions. Sean has been married to his wife Pamela for over 27 years and has 2 daughters. Rick came to Guidestone 25 years ago after working for another large financial firm for several years. As a senior relationship manager, he currently serves healthcare systems, universities, and other Christian organizations. Prior to his current role, he led Guidestone's retirement marketing team in developing effective communications. He graduated from the University of North Texas, completed the Graduate Marketing Certificate program at SMU, and is a certified employee benefits specialist. He and his wife Teresa have 3 daughters and 3 grandchildren, and he makes a mean gumbo. Well, we have a lot to cover today, so let's dive in. Why don't you kick us off, Sean?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for that nice introduction. And a special thank you to our listeners. Whether you're joining us live or watching the recording, we appreciate you giving us a piece of your valuable time to discuss the topic of starting strong. Rick, when I listen to this phrase, I often think about sports, and it could be any type of sports. And if it goes back to Pee Wee or to the professionals, if you're around the game long enough, or towards the fourth quarter or end of the game, you typically hear the fans or the coach scream for the team to finish strong. And we know that's important to finish strong, but I think starting strong is just as important, whether it's in sports or in your life in particular with your retirement. So Rick and I are going to give you a few tools, tips, and techniques today to help you do just that. But before we go there, Rick, you and I have been around for a while, and we are starting to hear that finish strong chats ourselves. But before we finish strong, we let's tell our story of how we started. So, Rick, share how you got started in your retirement journey.
Okay. Yeah, Sean, sure. Be glad to. When it comes to retirement planning, I'm probably a good example of second chances. Right after college, my wife and I were both school teachers participating in the teacher retirement plan, and our future looked secure. Then life threw us a curveball, and we had a special needs child. My wife quit working for a number of years, and I changed careers a couple of times. But God is faithful, and even though a couple of do-overs, we were able to get on track. So I hope our time together will be an encouragement to anyone listening that's been through similar experiences.
Excellent, excellent. Well, my story is, your typical story. I was just fresh out of college trying to figure out this thing called adulting. And when I started my first job, a gentleman who I considered a mentor came up to me and was just really telling me how to be professional and work in corporate America, if you will. And one of his top 3 things was make sure that you take care of your future. And by that, he was meaning put something back. And even if it's just a little, whatever your paycheck can do, you make sure that you take care of your future self, and your future self will thank you for it. And I did just that. And I think it was a powerful, powerful lesson for starting strong. And a matter of fact, what he shared with me is nothing more than just a good Bible stewardship that we should all do. Matter of fact, in Proverbs 6:6-8, it tells us that we should be like that ant, how it has no commander or overseer, but yet it collects its food in the summer, so it'll have provisions at harvest. We all have to answer to the point, what did we do in our summer years? What did we do when we were able to start producing and gathering our food? So as mentioned, Rick and I want to give you some tools and tips as well as techniques to help you do just that. So along your journey, you can start strong and ultimately finish strong. So let's get started by talking about the agenda. And the agenda we're just going to look at as we are. Um, so the agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about Guidestone. We don't assume that you know who we are, but we're going to tell you a little about who we are and what we do and how we do it. Then we're going to really talk about the 403b. What is that? We're familiar with other retirement plans and vehicles, but what is a 403b? We're talking about the different type of contribution options. Then we'll go into the saving and investment strategies. And then, of course, we're going to put a bow on it and give you some next steps, some call to action. So with that being said, Rick, tell them a little bit about who we are here at Guidestone.
Yeah, some of you may be new to Guidestone, so let's talk a little bit about that. We've been helping people prepare and live in retirement for over 100 years. Not me and Sean, but Guidestone. And we're located in Dallas, but we serve people who live literally all over the world. We're well known for our retirement plan expertise, especially with 403b plans for ministry organization. As a not-for-profit organization ourselves, there are no competing interests. Our bottom line is on helping our participants prepare for a secure future after years of faithful service. And by the way, you're going to hear us use that word retirement many times during this webcast. So I just want to share our definition of that word for you. You see, we know what the Bible says about the love of money, and we are not trying to encourage that. You see, we don't view retirement as the day you start an extended vacation and stop living a life of service. We would simply define retirement as the day your paycheck stops, because that day is coming for all of us. And our focus is on helping you best use your retirement plan so you are financially prepared for that day and continue to live out your life of service.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rick. We are much bigger than just focusing on retirement, even though that's important. We look at the entire scope of things, as Rick mentioned, and we want to make sure that you're prepared. So let's talk then. What is a 403b inside of retirement? Because we're familiar with things like a 401k or a traditional IRA, or maybe even a simple IRA, but a lot of folks, and I jokingly say this, I've heard it called a 4019 or 403-9B, and we've heard a lot of names, and it's because it's not a familiar title in the retirement world. But a 403b, as you can see, it's basically an employer-sponsored retirement plan. It's offered to you as an employee. And here's the difference. It's for nonprofit organizations. So you may be familiar with a 401k. Well, that's for the secular world, for-profit organizations, and it's similar. I always like to say they're first cousins, if you will. But a 403b is exactly what a 401k is, but it's for a nonprofit. Of course, there's some different things that go into play with a 401k versus a 403b. From an IRS standpoint, but for you and I, we get a chance to put contributions in. But the biggest thing was it's a contribution, the defined contribution plan, and that key word is contributions. It's where what we put in over time with growth and our contributions is what we'll pull out in our retirement years. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Rick, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different contribution options.
Yeah, Sean, let's talk about that, because whether it's a 403b plan or a 401k plan, any kind of defined contribution plan is going to have different sources of retirement contributions. So there are three different sources of funds that can go into your account. First, you can choose to have your employer set aside a portion of your paycheck for your retirement account. Second, employers can elect to contribute to their employees' retirement accounts. And finally, you could choose to consolidate your assets by rolling in your former employer's 401k or 403b plan into your current employer's plan. You could also roll in a traditional IRA. Hey, Sean, how about giving us some details on that?
Yeah, that's important to know because we get that question a lot. Well, we know that we can put as an employee contributions into our retirement plan, but we also know there's different type of contributions. So let's talk about those. See, there's two different type of contributions you can put in. One is tax sheltered and the other is Roth. Now, the difference between the two saving options is how they're taxed. Both have tax benefits but you're choosing the benefit of, do you pay taxes now or later? So let's talk about tax sheltered first. This is a traditional or pre-taxed contribution. It goes in tax deferred, and that means that you can defer your money in the current year without paying taxes on it. In addition, your taxable income for the current year will also be reduced. So let's give an example of that. If you made $50,000 in salary and you contributed $10,000 into your retirement plan, well then you're only owing $40,000 to in your federal income tax. So that it reduces your taxable income for the year. And then you get a chance to make those, when you make them withdrawals, you pay taxes in your retirement years. So a lot of people say, well, should I choose this option? Well, it's a personal choice, but we always state that if you're in a lower tax bracket during retirement, and I know the younger you are, that's kind of hard to determine now, but some people look at it, will I be in a lower tax bracket in my retirement years? Or bottom line, do I currently need as much take-home pay as possible? Because if so, I get a chance to lower my taxable income and not pay any taxes on that until, again, years down the road. Now, you can also see people ask quite a bit. We get this question, well, how much can I put into my retirement account? Well, everybody listening to me right now can put up to $20,500 of your annual salary if you make that amount into your retirement plan. And I know most of you, not all of you, are probably under the age of 50 that's listening to this, but those who are over the age of 50 can put in another $6,500 if they so choose. And again, if they make that amount of money. So the key is that you want to get started, determine if pre-tax is right for you, and then go from there. Now, I didn't mention about the required minimum distributions because, again, we're talking about starting strong. But when you do ultimately have to finish strong at the age of 72 is the only time that you have to begin taking money out unless you're still working. But we also look at it that, well, is this right for me? I tell, especially our ministers, this may be a good option for you because, as we discussed, you get a chance to reduce your taxable income in that year and you defer your taxation of contributions and earnings like we discussed. But the bigger thing is that although your housing allowance is not exempt from SECO or self-employment taxes, your contributions are. So keep that in mind. Whatever your tax bracket is right now, in addition to the entire 15.3% that you have to pay yourself, you get to reduce that amount from your federal income taxes. And that's huge. But another big thing is that when you're in retirement, you get tax-free housing allowance. I'm sure as we are doing this presentation, there are pastors calling our customer relations department, making withdrawals and claiming a portion or 100% of their withdrawals as housing allowance where they pay no taxes. And that's huge. So a lot of our ministers will take advantage of tax shelter contributions. But of course, we know that there's two sides to every story. And the other option is that you get a chance to do Roth contributions. And Roths those are starting to be, people are starting to really pay attention to Roths because you're starting to get an opportunity to make contributions and you pay taxes up front. And then those assets or those contributions and those earnings are growing tax free. So the good news is that you won't owe any taxes on the earnings of your contributions until you withdraw it at 59 and a half. Or I should say, when you withdraw your money at 59 and a half, you don't owe any taxes on those earnings, or if you had those contributions in for at least 5 years. But a quick reminder, if you do go the Roth and you get employer contributions, your employer contributions are always made in pre-taxed form. So you will have to pay taxes on those monies when you make withdrawals. So we get a question asked a lot, well, should I go in this direction? Well, again, it all depends on, do you want to pay taxes now or later? Basically, do you expect to be in a higher tax bracket during retirement? Again, I know that may be hard to determine right now, but you answer a couple of questions, or can you afford less take-home pay now in exchange for tax-free distributions? I can tell you that we serve a lot of missionaries around the world and a lot of foreign mission sending organizations, and those missionaries tend to leverage Roth options because those individuals are taking foreign income exclusions since they don't have any U.S. taxable income when they're overseas. So that's just an example of how they take advantage of it. But you don't have to be a missionary to still be able to take advantage of it. You just want to make sure it's right for you. So we've talked about the combination of contributions, but Rick, let's add the employer contributions on that and see how that all works.
Yeah, great. Sean, thanks. That was a real clear explanation. One thing I would point out about the Roth contributions, though, is that not all retirement plans offer that as an option. So if that's something you're interested in, you'd want to run that by your employer. So contributions can come from you, your employer, or both. Some employers will match up to a certain amount that the employee puts in, and some will make contributions whether or not the employee contributes. We call that a non-matching employer contribution. Some will do a combination of the two. But the important thing is to make sure that the total contributions between you and your employer are enough to prepare you for that day that your paycheck stops. Now, here's an example of a plan where the employer matches the employee's contribution dollar for dollar up to 5% of pay. In this example, that means that the first 5% an employee contributes to the plan is being doubled, and that's before it experiences any investment growth. Now, that's a great deal, but unfortunately, we often see people contribute below the full match or maybe even not at all. And we understand that budgets can be really tight, but it's not an all or nothing scenario. You can always start with a lower contribution and increase it later. Just don't neglect to get at least some of those matching dollars. You can increase later and get the full amount as soon as you can. Now, one thing I should point out before we go any further is that while all of this is important, it's also important to continue giving to the Lord and setting aside money for an emergency account. These retirement accounts are a really, really good way to prepare for retirement, but they don't work well for short-term emergencies. So you want to have some money set aside for those. Okay, vesting. Yeah, vesting. Probably the least interesting thing we're going to talk about. And Sean, I don't know how I got stuck with the slide, but we'll just move forward. Vesting is really just a word that refers to the amount of employer dollars you can take with you if you leave that employer within a certain period of time. So looking at this chart as an example, let's say that this employer has a 5-year vesting schedule and you leave after 2 years of service. Now, notice I said years of service and not years of participation in the retirement plan. At 2 years, this person would be 40% vested, so they could take 40 cents of every dollar that their employer put into their account. However, vesting doesn't apply to employee contributions. So regardless of when you left, you could take all of your contributions that you made yourself. Now, different employers have different vesting schedules, and some have immediate vesting. The important thing to remember is that vesting only applies to employer contributions, and it only matters if you leave before you have completed a certain number of years of service. Okay, let's get off the slide and get back to the interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, look, you're right. Not the best topic to talk about, but it's so important to know once you need to know that information. So I want to revisit the rollover conversation that Rick brought up earlier, because a lot of questions we get brought up is, does consolidation make sense for me? I mean, should I actually do it? Because here's what a lot of people think. They think they're diversified if they have their monies at multiple financial companies. And that's not necessarily diversification, because you may have the same type of investment strategy at every company. So it, in some cases, or a lot of cases, it does make sense to consolidate your assets. Some of the advantages you can see in front of you is that, first of all, you centralize your assets and it makes it easier to manage. You know, one thing that we want is simplicity in our lives. And a lot of times that when we have multiple accounts out there, you lose track. I know I've done it, and I've talked to and helped many of our clients who have done it as well. So centralizing your assets may be a benefit to you, but you also have flexible income options. At some point, when you do finish strong and get to your retirement years, you will have the ability to potentially annuitize your assets or things that will create some income for you in your retirement years. And that creates flexibility when you do bring assets over from other organizations. Of course, you may, if your plan sponsor allows, you may have loan availability. So that may allow you to borrow more against your retirement account in that aspect. And then it's potential reduction of fees. The higher your assets are, assets under management typically produces lower fees. So there's other things that will create some advantage for you. But I would always encourage you, if that's something that you're considering or you'd like to know more about, certainly reach out to us. You see, you can visit guidestone.org/consolidate, or call our customer relations department and ask for a rollover specialist, and we can assist you with those questions as well. So with that being said, let's talk now about saving and investment strategies. Rick, why don't you dive into that?
Okay, Sean, we've been talking about contribution options, but now we're going to switch gears and talk about strategies for saving and investing those contributions. Now, while it's great if your employer contributes to your account, Make sure the total contribution between you and your employer is enough to reach your goals. Don't just stop at the amount that the employer matches. A good starting place is to aim for a total contribution equaling 15% of your pay, and that would come from both you and your employer combined. If you start saving earlier in your career, that amount, or maybe even slightly less, may be enough. But if you've waited until later in life to start saving, you'll need to do a little homework to find out the amount that's right for you. Now, if you're a Guidestone participant, you can log into your account to access the Retirement Planner calculator. It's right there on your homepage. Just look for the green Retirement Planner button, and that will help you determine the amount that's right for you. Spending time with that calculator is probably the most powerful 10 minutes you can spend to get on track. And I would highly recommend, if you're married, that you have your spouse sit through it with you just to help get on the same page. To make changes to your contribution amount, ask your employer for a retirement contribution agreement if that calculator tells you need to make some changes. And by the way, you'll find a number of other helpful calculators, such as how to pay off your mortgage, at the address listed here. Now, Sean, how confident are people that they are saving the right amount for retirement?
Yeah, that's a good question because, as you mentioned, starting early, working with calculators, doing your homework leads to that one word, which is confidence. And what we're seeing over the years is that confidence tends to wane, and sadly, the numbers do not look good. You can see here on the screen that 21% of workers are very confident that they've saved enough. So you turn that on its head. That means 79% of workers currently feel like they're not saving enough for their retirement years. And if you jump to those who are in retirement, 39% feel like that they're very confident they've saved enough. About 61% feels like they may outlive their money. So we want to make sure that we help you and help those overall numbers, incrementally go up. And the way to do that is some of the things that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about throughout this presentation. But certainly we would like to see those numbers go up because here's the thing. There's a lot of myths out here that Rick and myself and our team try to help our participants understand it's not always the case with you. Like, for example, working longer is always an option. Now, here's the truth. We, as a society, we're living longer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're working longer. We are starting to see our lifespan incrementally increase. Matter of fact, one of the fastest growing groups in America is what they call the centenarians. Those are people that are turning the age of 100 years old. But that, again, doesn't necessarily mean that they're working longer. What that means is that they may spend about a third of their life in retirement. So that's the importance of making sure that you put a little bit back like that ant. We also hear that paying off debt is a priority over savings. Now, Rick talked about the importance of making sure that you have something put back and why I believe that we should be a good steward and pay off our debt. We want to make sure that we take and leverage the most powerful thing when it comes to our retirement, which is time. So we, while debt is important that we pay that off, putting that off in terms of our savings, you may have to consider doing a combination of both. Basic rule of thumbs will work for me. We hear that a lot, and we talk about basic rule of thumbs, but keep in mind they're just that. They're basic rule of thumbs. What may work for you living in one state or one city or your family may not be what is required or what is a rule of thumb. So you may not be able to lean on that. And then, of course, employer contributions alone will be enough. While we are grateful anytime that our employer contributes to our future, we want to make sure that we're coming alongside them and doing our part as well. So those are myths, and we can talk about, if we had time, so many others that are not always the case with preparing for retirement. They're just roadmaps or guidelines. But the key is starting early. So you can see here on this slide where it talks about if you're just putting away $100 a month at 6% annual earnings, then the earlier you start, the more you're projected to have. At 25, that represents over $200,000. But 1 year later, you can see that it goes down to over $187,000. So there's a significant difference or variance just for waiting 1 year, let alone waiting 5 to 10 years. But here's the key. Regardless of where you are, the important thing is start strong. In some cases, if you started at 30, you have to start stronger. But the key is don't put it off another minute if you can. If you don't have to. So Let's go ahead now and jump into the investment strategies. Rick, I'll turn that back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Generally there are three different approaches you can use for choosing your investments. And before determining the approach that's right for you, there are three things you need to know about yourself. So first of all, what is your time horizon? In other words, how much time do you have before you retire, and how many years should you plan for taking distributions after you retire? Second, what is your risk tolerance? Meaning, how nervous do you get when the market swings up and down? It's ironic we're talking about that right now with everything that's going on in the world. And, that's an emotional factor, but it's important because if you're not comfortable with the amount of risk in your portfolio, you might make a bad choice at a bad time and make a bad decision. So you want to make sure that you are investing according to your risk tolerance. And then third, what are your investment goals? What is it that you want your money to do for you in the future? So after you've considered these three things and you kind of know that about yourself, now it's time to pick your approach. The first approach, and almost all retirement plans have this, is what we would call the do it for me approach, because you would simply choose a pre-blended diversified fund that is actually a mixture of many funds. And that's important because diversification is one of the main principles you want to make sure you adhere to. So one way to do this is through what we call a target date fund. All you have to do is pick the fund that has the target date that is closest to the year you plan to retire. Then, so when you are younger, that fund has a higher ratio of stocks, meaning more volatility. But as you move to and through the target date, the fund gradually becomes more conservative by adding in more bonds. All you have to know is your target date, and the rest happens for you. Now, another do it for me option that's a little more hands-on is what we call a target risk fund. These funds are also pre-mixed portfolios, and that's great because they're diversified, but there is no target date, and they don't get more conservative over time. You would be taking the responsibility to choose a fund that has an appropriate level of risk and then move to a more conservative fund as you approach retirement. Typically, these funds have labels such as aggressive or growth, moderate or conservative, and that gives you an idea of the ratio of stocks and bonds. The beauty of both the target date and target risk option is simplicity. So many people who go this route will choose only one fund. Now, Sean, what about the people who really want to be more hands-on?
Yeah, so we have an option for them. We call it the do it myself option. Basically, it's where this approach is designed to help you build your own portfolio, utilizing a broad range of core and specialty funds that provides the flexibility to address specific investment strategies. So just keep in mind that if you indeed maybe are proficient enough to design your own portfolio, or you have a team or individual to assist you, Guidestone will come alongside you where you need help. And there's also tools that will help you as well. As an example, there's an investment recommendation tool that we have on our website that we take the bias out, and you can use this tool to help you determine a appropriate investment portfolio for you. So just know there's things there that will help you in addition to Guidestone, and we'll come alongside you. But if you want to do it yourself, then absolutely you have access to do just that. But then there's a third option. If you don't want to do it by yourself, or you don't want us to do it with you, there's a do it together option. And this is where we get a chance to come alongside you. This is our most personalized level of service. Guidestone Portfolio, or Guidestone Personal Advisory Service, we call it GPAS, is a professionally managed account fee-based service that provides you with a dedicated and licensed advisor. So this advisor's role is to customize a financial plan according to your unique risk tolerance, as well as providing ongoing investment management. So if you want that personal connection, that a personal advisor relationship, a comprehensive financial planning process, and ongoing portfolio management, then that may be ideal for you. And typically, I would say this is a strategy that is for those who are nearing retirement, but again, it's not limited to that. So anyone who's looking for a higher level of service, or just don't have the time, interest, or knowledge to manage their investment and or planning decisions. That is, again, a fee-based service that we do offer. So I want to, as we are wrapping it up, we've talked about a lot of things, but I'm going to just shoot it over to Rick and give you some next steps.
Yeah. Okay, Sean. The last thing that Sean and I want to do today is throw a bunch of information at you and not provide some simple steps that could literally change your life in the future. We like it to be like if you could jump in a time machine today and go forward, that you could look back to today and say, man, that was the day I made a small change, but it really had a dramatic effect on my future. So that's our goal. So if you fell asleep during the vesting slide, now is the time to wake up and get ready to jot down a note or two. Okay, step one, if you haven't done so already, get enrolled. See, none of this makes any difference if you're not participating in your retirement plan. So contact your benefits person today and complete an enrollment form. If you're already enrolled and you've used our calculators and you've decided that there's a certain contribution amount you want to increase your contributions, ask that same person, your benefits office, for a retirement contribution agreement to make a change. Now, for step two, regarding rollovers, I'm going to suggest you do something simpler than complete a rollover form. If you've decided that consolidating an old employer's retirement plan or an IRA is right for you, then either call the number shown here or log into your account and look for the rollover link on your homepage. That's way easier than completing a form. Now, speaking of logging onto your account, here's how you do that. Go to guidestone.org and look for the login area. If you haven't set up your account yet, click the green text that says create an account below that first box on the left. From there, it will walk you through the process to register so you can see your account and all the resources that are available to you. Sean, what are some of those resources?
Yeah, and it's as simple as that. Once you complete that process, you have access to your portfolio. You can look at it every day if you like, hopefully see it going up. But you also have your access to change your investment dashboard. You can go on and do things like update your beneficiary designations. Rick talked about a host of tools that we have, educational resources, your tax documents, as well as your quarterly statements. All that information is housed on myguidestone.org under your login information. So we encourage you to take full advantage of that. Go online, look at it, kind of go around and make sure that you're comfortable and understand it. But also know that we also have a telephone app or a phone app or a mobile app, I should say, that if you wanted to download that, you have access to the mobile app at your fingertips. So just know that all that information is available to you. This is what a quarterly statement looks like. Nothing that you haven't seen, but they're housed there, so you have access at any point in time that you want. So that's a lot of information. We know we provided a lot of things for you in this 30 minutes, but we want to wrap it up by telling you now to take action. Rick?
Okay, so it looks like we might actually have a little bit of time to take some questions, but before we do that, let's recap some small steps today that could have a major impact on your future. So get on a budget and develop a disciplined approach to managing your money. Make sure that includes giving, saving for emergencies, and contributing to your retirement plan. Use the calculators we discussed earlier to track your progress and hold yourself accountable. And last, you may want to consider opening an investment account to fund those emergencies and future expenses we talked about earlier. And if you still have questions, then you can contact us at the phone number or email address that's listed on this next slide. And our folks in their customer solutions area are very knowledgeable, and they're also very nice.
Alrighty, well, a huge thank you to our panelists for covering these topics. So now let's take a look at the questions submitted during today's presentation. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions tab in your attendee control panel. All right, so one of our attendees asked, his wife is a new teacher, and he asked, how do we recommend to begin to plan for retirement since she does not get a 403B?
Well, as a former teacher, and I don't know what state this person is in, but I can tell you that first of all, I would check with your school district and see if the school district has a teacher retirement plan. Probably does. and it may actually be mandatory that you contribute to that. So understand the teacher retirement program for your state. And then beyond that, then I would, again, look at our calculators and see for both spouses what your family income needs will be in retirement. Use our calculators, and you can factor in what you're projected to get from your teacher retirement, and then make sure that you're contributing enough on your own to make up any difference that there might be to make sure your retirement is fully funded.
Yeah, let me add to that. If they don't offer teacher retirement, then you may want to consider open up an individual retirement account, an IRA. You can put up to $6,000. So it's important that you, of course, be your own advocate for your retirement if they are not doing it for you.
That's great. Thank y'all. So another attendee asked, can you make 4039 contributions in both a Roth and tax sheltered simultaneously?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, you can. As mentioned, there are limits that you can put into your retirement account. So if you wanted to take advantage of both options, you can put a portion of your contributions in both a tax sheltered as well as a Roth contribution. So there's no restriction from doing that.
Thanks, Sean. Another question came in asking, what is the maximum amount you can contribute to your retirement account between you and your employer?
I'll take that again. Well, we talked about if you're under the age of 50, so I'll just use that as an example. You can put up to $20,500. And then, by the way, if you're doing that, we salute you. The younger you are, the more you're putting in, you're making a sacrifice early. You're really properly preparing for your retirement journey. But then your employer, can come along, and then if they was blessed to max you out, they can put up to $61,000 total in your retirement account. So that would be a tremendous blessing, and we have seen some of our participants as well as their employees do just that for their staff.
Yeah, if I could elaborate on that just a little bit, if we have anybody who's listening who's over 50, then yes, that 61,000 is the maximum between you and your employer that can go into the plan. But if you're over 50, that 6,500 per year catch-up limit is in addition to that 61,000. So there's quite a bit of headroom on what you can put into a plan.
Absolutely.
That's super helpful. I think we have time for one more. Someone asked, I want to save for retirement, but our budget is really tight. How are people affording to save?
Yeah, I'll be glad to take that one. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'll just say it very plainly that your retirement tomorrow is funded with the things you do without today. And so I would say step one would be to look at your budget and say, okay, what can I do without today to begin saving for tomorrow? I mean, you'll find all kinds of articles out there on the internet about what if you skipped 1 cup of coffee a day? If you just funded the price of a cup of coffee into your retirement plan, what would that do? And it's pretty dramatic. But I would say that the important thing is, you'll hear us use rules of thumb like you should save 15%, and people will wait until they think they can afford 15%, and that's a mistake. If all you can afford is 1%, start at 1%, especially if your employer has a match, get some of that match. And then you pay off a car, bump it up a little bit. You get a raise, bump it up a little bit. Just keep it, just do the best you can. Pray about it, don't worry about it, but just make sure you're doing something.
All righty. Well, thank you again so much to our panelists. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. And there will also be a follow-up survey following the end of the webinar, and we would really appreciate it if you took a few minutes to leave us some feedback. On behalf of GuideStone and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. We look forward to talking with you again.